Welcome back. In this video I'm going to go over how to lay out and taper the legs on the occasional table that we're building. There's a few different methods for actually tapering the legs, and I think you'll enjoy seeing how each one of those methods works. The first step is to lay out the tapers. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is we're going to remove the wood on the inside where the mortise is. So wherever there's a mortise, that's where the wood is going to be removed. So for example, we've got a mortise right here. This part is going to come away. We're going to draw a taper on here starting from the top, and it's going to come down like this. We are going to draw the taper on the outside, so let's begin by drawing the taper. The first step is to measure down from the top 5 inches. The reason why I'm going 5 inches down is because my apron width is 4 inches. I don't want the taper to run into this area of the mortise because we'll end up with a gap there. So we've measured down 5 inches, and we're going to measure over from the inside a 1/2 inch. In other words, we're going to take a 1/2 inch taper from here all the way up to nothing, and that part is going to be removed. So 1/2 inch from the inside, that is the side where the mortise is, and we'll draw a line. You can just take another one of these pieces here and place it right on here and draw the taper. As I mentioned, we're going to have a taper on both sides where there's a mortise. But right now I'm going to just mark the taper on one side only. However, I can carry that line, this tapered line, I'm going to carry it around on the bottom side here of the leg. Let's do that. We'll carry it around using the square. And then we can mirror that taper line on the other side. Measure down 5 inches. Connect the two. And now you can see that this taper line is drawn mirrored on both sides. So this is the part that we're actually going to remove. This part right here. As I mentioned, we're going to put a taper on this side as well, but I don't want to draw that taper yet. I want to cut this taper first, and then we'll draw this taper right here. Let's go ahead and lay out a taper on each one of these legs. Now that I've got all the tapers marked, I'm just going to double check and make sure that I'm taking the taper off on the right side and then I'm not taking off too much taper. We don't want to invest all this work into mortising these legs and then taper it on the wrong side. So double check. This part here is where the mortise is. This taper is coming off. Same way here. There's a taper there on the mortise side. And again, I've just marked the taper for one mortise, actually one side, and we'll just take that off first, and then we'll remove the taper on the other side. Let me show you a couple different methods for removing the wood. Let's start with this one here, and I'm going to start by sawing away the waste. I'm going to use a panel saw. This is a panel rip saw, which works quite effectively. We'll start here and saw away the waste, just like this. Now you may wonder why I have this in the vise at an angle. Why don't I stand it upright like this and work at it like this? Well, one, you can hear the difference. There's some vibration. But also remember the straws. Here's the straws like this. If we cut through the fibers, the straws like this, it just works much better than cutting on top like this where they're all wanting to break. When I'm using a panel saw, you'll notice I have my first finger pointing out. Again, just like most of these tools, I don't want to cram all 4 fingers in the handle. The handle wasn't designed for that, and that first finger helps point in the direction of the saw, making it straight. I'm also using the entire length of the saw, and you'll notice that my arm is perfectly in line with the back of the saw. Resist the temptation to grab the piece like this. One ill stroke and you'll feel it. I will say though, however, that all of my saws are equipped with flesh detecting technology. Every single one of my saws are guaranteed to stop if you slip. But please don't slip. I can't guarantee the depth of cut, but I can guarantee that it will stop. This saw is somewhat fine. That's why it's taking a little bit longer to cut through, which is nice. This is about a 10 teeth per inch. If you had a more aggressive saw, say like a 5 teeth per inch, we'd really be able to cut through this quickly. It'd be a little bit harder to control the saw, so a finer tooth saw is actually easier to control. Now when we get towards the end, you'll notice that I'm holding this piece right up here. The reason for that is if I don't, it's easy for my saw to wiggle. By holding this tight, it helps hold the saw in the curve. One problem with sawing here is that it's easy to steer the saw accidentally into the leg. When I started up here, I started right up here like this, and I actually aligned the saw up with that line so that it would follow with the line. If you start getting off, the key is to back up in the cut and twist your wrist so that you can turn it in the right direction. We'll use the entire length of the saw, and as we get closer, you'll hear the slight tone difference, and you'll be able to see as I cut through right there. I'm slowing the pressure, lightening up on the pressure as I come through so I don't tear into my bench. There we go, just a little bit. Hear that tone change? There it is. So I stayed on the outside of the line, which is always very important. When we use a machine, oftentimes, we think of cutting right to the line. When you use a handsaw like this, there is a little bit of undulation to the surface. It's a little rough. So it's understood that we want to stay on the outside of the line and then simply use a hand plane to clean up to the line. You'll also notice here that I haven't come all the way up to the top. Again, don't worry about that. That's not a problem. We can actually come in here with a chisel and remove part of that material. So you can come in just like this and remove this material. And then we'll come back with a hand plane and plane that smooth. When I'm planing this, you'll notice that the plane is hitting at this point and this point. That's because this point is high. I want to bring this down, but I don't want to bring it down too far. If I bring this part down too far, it's going to cut into this mortise area, and we will get a gap there. To avoid cutting into this part, you may even take a little bit of a pencil line and mark it there. If you pass that pencil line, then you know you've gone too far with the plane. Now right here on the end I'm running into a little wiry grain. It's probably because the grain comes along here and it actually is coming back this way. So what I'm going to do is back the plane off and just take off a very fine shaving coming back this way. There's a little tear out there because of the grain change, but you'll notice I'm stopping the plane. That concludes the first taper. I'll go ahead and cut the rest of these tapers, and I want to introduce another method as well. Another technique for removing the waste to create a taper is one that I actually prefer. Using a draw knife is very effective. Now you have to make sure that the grain is going fairly straight. If you have wiry grain, it can be a little trickier with the draw knife. Let me put the leg in the vise and show you how this works. First of all, I'm going to show you how fast you can taper a leg with a draw knife. Then I'll slow it down to where you can understand what we're doing. Now that's pretty fast. Now you might be thinking, that sure is one fast way for me to ruin my leg. But I'm going to show you, we'll slow down the process. And I think once you try it, you'll be pleasantly surprised at how easy it is and how fast and effective it is. I'm just planing out any slight anomalies in the surface. Bringing it down nice and flat right to the line. There we go. Let me take another leg. This leg is fairly straight grained, and let's slow down the process to you so you can understand exactly how I'm doing this. I'm going to start over here. And there's no need to start right up here. That's the least of our worries right up here at this part of the taper. I'm going to start down in this area right here. So you'll notice I'm going at an angle. I'm not trying to take the whole bit off at one time. Going at an angle like this and just taking off right over here, basically chamfering this edge. You see, now we'll take off a little bit more back there. Then we'll come on this other side and we'll do the exact same thing. Just chamfering, mainly focusing in this area down here because that's where the bulk is. And just take that off, chamfering it. Now we essentially have a mountain peak in the middle. And you can just take that. You'll also notice that I'm skewing the knife like this. So I'm skewing the knife. What that does, it helps shear through the grain better as opposed to just going straight like this. You can also pull the knife. As you pull it towards you, you can also slice it. And that's a very effective method. The other great thing about the chamfer is that when I see that chamfer disappear, then I know I've gone to the line, as opposed to having to bend over and look at it. And that's how you taper a leg using a draw knife. I've got one last leg to taper on one side, so I'll go ahead and do that, and then I'll mark the other tapers. I'll show you how we mark the other tapers, and we'll finally finish up tapering the legs. I'm done tapering one side of each one of these legs. The side facing up is the side that I've tapered. Now what I've got to do is I've got to turn the leg and taper this other face. Not the outside face, but the face where the mortise is. Let's go ahead and draw the taper. Again, the layout is exactly the same. We're going to measure down from the top 5 inches and over from the inside 1/2 inch. Then you can take the straight side here. Don't use the tapered side. We'll use the straight side as a ruler here and draw the taper. Again, making sure that we're going to remove the material on the mortise face. I'm going to go ahead and carry that line around. You can use a square, you can even use your finger as a guide. Carry it around and draw that mirrored line on the other side. Measure down 5 inches. Connect the dots. So now you can see we've got that taper drawn to where we're going to remove the material on the mortised face. I actually prefer to use the draw knife. I think it's the fastest, most effective way. Again, the key with using the draw knife is to watch the grain. You see how the grain's wanting to lift? I'm just going to go easy. Occasionally, I'll have to come back and push the knife into it. Turning it and pushing it in like this. Watch the grain right there. See, the grain is diving in right there, so I'm going to stop before I carry on and come back like this, angling the draw knife and coming at it just like that. One word of caution here on the draw knife. Drawing a sharp blade towards yourself really isn't the problem because your arms act as a stop. One thing you've got to be cautious of here is just in handling the knife. These edges are very sharp, especially out here where your fingers and your hands are. So just be careful with the draw knife. Set it down before you move something on the bench. Simple things like that. It's time for me to hand plane this, and if I clamp this in the vise here, you can see I've got the taper here and the piece wants to go down like this. There's a couple solutions to that problem. One is you can put a piece of wood in here like this and bring this down on top of it so it's good and solid. The other solution would be to simply affix it into the tail vise where it's clamped from the ends. I'm going to go ahead and mark and cut the remainder of these tapers.